The Hyper Pro from Freak Athlete is the new and vastly improved version of the Nordic Hyper GHD. In my opinion, this new version takes it from a bit of an overpriced gimmick to a highly functional replacement for multiple pieces of equipment that I already own. Freak Athlete sent one of these to pretty much every YouTuber on the planet, but not me. Because up until a few months ago, I didn't even exist until the last Canadian Steve gave up his post and I was created to take his place. Which means this is probably the only non-sponsored review of this thing that you're gonna find on YouTube. As usual, this will be from the perspective of cost and shipping to Canada, the greatest maple leaf flag based country in the world. You can't challenge that fact and I dare you to try. I think my priorities for how I use this are different than all of the other reviews I've seen, so I'm not going to be covering every single detail of how it works, but instead specifically comparing it to the two pieces of equipment that I'm trying to get rid of. I have a dedicated GHD or glute ham developer, which I use for doing GHRs or glute ham raises. Those acronyms confused the heck out of me when I first started doing them, so I hope that helps, but I'll probably still mix them up throughout this review. The other machine is a leg extension leg curl that I really like, but these both take up a lot of space and they are not easy to move around. I had been following the previous version for a while, but I personally prefer glute ham raises over Nordic curls, and doing GHRs on the previous version was honestly a bit of a half-assed afterthought. So when they came out with the leg developer on this new version, I finally decided to give it a try. Let's briefly cover the 9 movements that this is supposed to replace. We have Nordic curls, glute ham raises, back extensions, decline sit-ups, barbell hip thrusts, Bulgarian split squats, reverse hyper, sort of, I guess, leg extensions, hamstring curls, and with the upper body add-on kit, it opens up a bunch of interesting movements that may or may not be any good, but I'll cover that later. Until I started doing glute ham raises, I had never felt a more effective burn in my hamstrings before, and I do feel like they've noticeably improved my deadlift. So my main question was, can this completely replace my dedicated GHD? Now, to give you some context of why I like doing these, I have to confess to you some of my deepest, darkest secrets. You see, I have a max deadlift of about 425 pounds, but I pull sumo, which is of course cheating and doesn't count, as any gym bro can tell you.
Shame!
Oh man, that was hard to admit. Thank you for hearing me out. I also have maybe a max squat of 300 pounds on a good day.
Allegedly.
I'm talking like I got up the courage to say hi to a pretty girl and she kind of smiled in my general direction sort of good day, which I think scientifically speaking adds at least 20 pounds to any lift. So with those strength benchmarks in mind, I suck at Nordic curls, and even really strict glute ham raises are still very difficult for me. But that's where this baby shines, because it has some features that help you progress in difficulty. You've probably seen lots of reviews where people talk about how you can adjust the angle for Nordic curls, which makes them much easier and allows you to progress over time. It's probably the best feature of this machine. What is not often mentioned is that you can do the same thing with glute ham raises, making this the only GHD out there with adjustable angles, so anyone can learn how to do them. My main concern with this was stability, and it does wobble a little bit if I'm trying to shake it, but so does this one. In practical use, the Hyper Pro actually feels a bit more stable compared to this one, probably because of its new extended base. I was pleasantly surprised, and I would not be concerned about stability at all. So it's not like this is overly difficult to get on, but the Hyper Pro is still much easier to get into position. It has these really nicely knurled, magnetically secured foot pegs, and you know how much I love magnets. It makes it really easy to step on and get into position and get off again very easily. Plus, you can adjust this to any height you want, which makes it very versatile, really easy to use. I love this. So for me, there's no real downside compared to the standalone unit, and a lot of really nice perks with the Hyper Pro. So that's a big win for me in my books. While we have it set up, let's talk about GHD sit-ups. Again, I'm actually gonna say that I think the Hyper Pro is better for these because you can adjust the distance between the foot rollers, which helps to more securely lock your feet in place. I think this is a fantastic movement. I'm gonna do one here for getting a really good stretch. and a great range of motion, but it does come with a bit of a caveat for me. I might be a freak on this, but if I do 3 full sets of these to failure, I get crazy motion sickness. Like, I feel like I have the worst hangover of all time for the rest of the day. So again, I might just be a weirdo, but if you're someone who's prone to motion sickness and you're buying this specifically for GHD sit-ups, having never done them before, I just thought it might be worth mentioning that it could possibly not be for you. So that's one machine I can throw out. But what about the leg developer? For starters, I have never been a fan of the type of attachment like this that goes on the end of a workout bench because they always suck. A typical workout bench at 17 inches is way too low to get any kind of clearance. But this is a lot different because it's much higher, so you get a whole lot of space under there to work with. I'm comparing it to this discontinued old Northern Lights bench that I've had for years because it's one of the best that I've ever used. The tough thing is to get the pivot point lined up with your knee so that when you move it up and down, it doesn't slide up and down your shins or your calves. But the really difficult thing to get right is the force curve. It's almost always very easy at the bottom. It gets the most difficult as you go up and then completely loses tension at the top, which is the opposite of what you want for hypertrophy training. Ideally, you want the most tension in the most stretched position. Looking at these two side by side, I am honestly quite confused how Freak Athlete did it, but it really does feel like a consistent weight all the way through the full range of motion. They advertised that, and I didn't believe them, but it really does feel very, very good. Both movements, the leg extensions and hamstring curls, feel much better on the Hyper Pro. For leg extensions, I feel I can get a much better stretch at the bottom and still have good tension all the way from bottom to top. And with hamstring curls, I feel consistent tension that doesn't disappear at the very top, where my other machine would suddenly flip up and hit my butt if I tried taking it through a full range of motion. So in my opinion, the Hyper Pro is actually an upgrade over my old faithful standalone unit. And the only downside is that I now have some setup time between exercises, but it's not difficult and I'm more than willing to make that trade in order to free up all of this space when I need it. Let me show you what the setup time looks like. They claim this takes 5 seconds, which is a charitable stretch, but it's not difficult at all. You really just have to get this lined up, which does take a little bit of getting used to, but I'm sure I'll get better over time. Lock that guy down, flip that off its magnetic holder, take this up and press to secure, good to go. For hamstring curls, we need to release this latch, pop that up, and then this is the attachment for hamstring curls. Screw it in to tighten it, and then the last step for this one is just to release this. And now you're in hamstring curl position. Pro tip, don't be a dummy like me. There's a reason why they tell you to take this off during leg extensions. The first time I went to test this out, I thought, what a stupid waste of time. I then proceeded to kick my legs out really hard without any weight and absolutely smoked myself in the chest. So yeah, don't do that. It really hurt. Those are the main reasons why I bought this, but there are a bunch of other movements you can do with it, and let's go over a few that I consider to be a bit of a bonus. If you've ever thought that getting waterboarded sounds like a fun weekend activity, then allow me to introduce you to Bulgarian split squats. There are a lot of other ways that you can do this, but they do work really, really well on this, unfortunately. Now, if you want to pack more junk in your trunk than Newt Scamander, hip thrust might be right for you. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I can hip thrust even half of what literally any female fitfluencer half my size can do. But if you wanna feel your glutes burn more than that time you won first place at a ghost pepper chili eating contest, then these will do the job. Back extensions on this feel amazing. It's pretty much infinitely adjustable for height and angle, so there's lots of room for progression. I would not have bought a standalone unit for this, but I really like that I can now incorporate them into my programs, so this is a huge bonus for me. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the upper body kit, other than to say that I think this was a pretty creative thing to add on. It really didn't take much to throw that eye bolt in the end, sell a couple handles, and give you some more options. This is not gonna get you jacked, but if this is the only piece of equipment that you have in your gym, I think it's really cool that you can at least do some version of a lot of different upper body exercises. And if you're pretty creative, there's a lot you can actually do with this. For overall build quality, I think it's pretty good. If I'm being incredibly nitpicky, some of the pads, like, they don't line up perfectly. They're not microscopically centered and symmetrical. There's a little bit of movement in the machine, but none of that seems to affect the functionality at all. In practical use, it's extremely stable. It feels really good for all the movements I've tried with it. And the vinyl, we'll see how it holds up over time, but it feels really nice. It's very smooth, very soft. That was a big improvement over the previous version. If you're not used to handling so many knobs at once, I know all of these colorful bits can be a little bit confusing. It did take me a few tries to figure out what everything does, but it's not difficult and you do get used to it pretty quick. Okay, let's look at the price because I know a lot of people were really confused about how this was shown on their website. First off though, I need to address something about the company. Right now, the site shows that it's on sale for $300 off the regular price. As a great man once said, bullshit. It's always on sale. That's the regular price. It never goes up from the listed price. They did this the entire time they were selling the first version, and they seem to be continuing the practice with this one. I get why companies do this because it promotes urgency in the consumer to get it while it's on sale, but I really hate this practice. When companies do this, it screams to me that they're selling cheap online garbage and they need to resort to consumer manipulation to push their products. Long-term established companies don't do this, and I would really like to encourage Freak Athlete to stop it, but that's how they've always done things, so I'm not holding my breath. Okay, here's where people get confused. There are 3 individual parts to this machine. You have the base unit, and then the GHD pad is an additional add-on, and the leg developer is another separate add-on, and technically the upper body kit is an add-on to the leg developer add-on. So when you go to the website, by default, all of these pieces are selected already, bringing the total price up to 1,800 Canadian or $1,300 US. So people are upset because they saw an advertisement on Instagram that says the cost was 1,100 Canadian or $800 US, which is just the cost of the base unit. The GHD pad is 250 Canadian and 170 US, which seems like a lot just for a pad, but from my perspective, since that was the main thing I was looking for, I just considered it part of the overall price. The leg developer, $400 Canadian, $300 US. And if you want something like this without taking up a bunch of extra space, I think it's very much worth it. The upper body kit, which is really just the handles and an extra strap, is 50 Canadian, 30 US. And if you think you'll use it, that's not really unreasonable. I bought it mostly because I also wanted to review it, but I was already looking for adjustable handles just like that. So I figured I'd get some use out of it. Shipping to me in Canada is 97 Canadian dollars, which seems pretty reasonable. So for my personal conclusion, comparing the Hyper Pro against a dedicated GHD and leg developer, I don't feel like I've lost any functionality, but have in fact maybe gained a couple of cool features and even improved on those other 2 machines in a few aspects. It's not what I would call cheap, but if I can make better use of my limited space by going from this to this, then I'm very happy with my purchase and I would highly recommend it. If you found this video useful, please give it a like and consider subscribing. I don't have an affiliate link for Freak Athlete yet, but I am working on getting one. So if you're interested in buying it, please check the description. And if there happens to be a link down there, please use it. It's a big help to the channel. I've got some really fun videos coming up. My Rep Aries 2.0 should be here at the end of the week. And Bells of Steel just sent me a couple of cool little things to try out. So a lot of things coming down the pipe. Until then, see you in the next one.
So as they say in Canada, peace out.